It looks like here I got it covered. Should be on my page now.
Okay, nice, nice. So, my distinguished comrade, thanks for joining me on this live show. And like you and I usually do it times and again, we do our utmost best to educate our people, educate Ambazonians with regards to what's happening in the world and see how we can tie it to our own revolution and our own struggle and to continue to psychologically strengthen our people and let them understand that we have just one way out: fight for unconditional independence. I'm also very grateful that I'm sharing my platform with you. I know you are very knowledgeable as far as geopolitics is concerned. You always are there and very helpful in educating our people and seeing how we are supposed to move. I also want to use this opportunity to thank you for all your service and how much work you've put in as far as our freeing Ambazonia is concerned. Thank you very much, comrade.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And
so today, go ahead. Sorry.
I actually should add that sometimes people misuse the word rebel, because I think that when they refer to rebel, I come to your channel and I see the level of educational material, the kind of opposition and challenges that you pose to all of us. I think you deserve that name. I mean, thank you for all of the work that you do almost on a daily basis in educating our people, keeping us all abreast with things that are happening on ground zero and the rest of the world. Thanks for having me. It's such an honor to be here.
Thanks very much, comrade. Thank you. Yeah, today, I know this is a long overdue outing that you and I were supposed to have. We've been trying as much as possible to, educate our people on what people like us are doing in the continent to be free. We also try as much as possible to explain certain, situations or scenarios in the continent in relation and the world globally in relation to our quest and our plight for freedom. You and I think we've seen a couple of incidents or events that have taken place across the world, specifically in Africa. And I really want us to dive right deep into some of these events and be able to really, strengthen our people's minds and let them understand that what we are doing is not out of the ordinary. We are just one normal people like other people that we are admiring. And to the best of our knowledge, there are people also admiring us in what we are doing in Ambazonia to fight for unconditional independence. There is a veil that some people see and they understand what we are fighting. And I would like you, as a very powerful geopolitical analyst, to be able to look at, let's first start with West Africa. The events happening in West Africa, ECOWAS, the Sahel region, what is actually going on there, and how that applies to our case in Ambazonia. Then we move on to set the tone on what AU as a body and how we perceive it and how it's supposed to function. What are the impediments surrounding the AU? And then we'll look also into what is currently happening in Palestine, because the entire world is talking about it. And why we, as real revolutionaries in this quest for independence, are taking a stance and a position in this. Then we'll round up with maybe other issues or events or incidents occurring in the continent. We can touch on them. These are the core, uh, aspects that we're going to discuss about in this outing. So when you look at West Africa, you see what is happening in West Africa. Let me throw it out there to you. What are you seeing? What is happening in West Africa, ECOWAS, the Sahel region, and what are the learnings that we Ambazonians, the genuine nationalists, the freedom fighters, what can we take from there? So
Absolutely.
give me an opinion about that and let's dive into that.
Thank you, Logistic Chief. And once again, I very much appreciate it. It's such an honor for me to be on this platform. We've talked about getting together now for quite a while, and I'm glad that we've had this opportunity to put this together so we can continue to educate people. You would agree with me that there's been a seismic shift in geopolitics, and not just geopolitics, economics, and events that are happening in the world. For the longest time, right now, the United States, maybe starting from the 16th century through the Industrial Revolution, and all the way to maybe late 19th century, where you had right after the Second World War, you had a single superpower. After Germany had been defeated, Russia was weakened. China, when you people that had traveled to China, even in the 80s, when you went there, there was hunger, starvation. People were still living in huts, small communities, and then, so the United States was the guy still standing, the superpower. So everybody followed what they said, followed their lead, listened to them. Now there's been a significant seismic shift in the rest of the world where you're having people, let's say, for us, let's take a case in Africa. You have a population of 1.5 billion people that are looking around themselves, looking at how other countries are making improvements and asking themselves whether they're going to continue to stay in this kind of situation and challenging the dogma that the doctrine that had pre-existed. In the 1960s, late 50s, early 60s, you had a situation where they promised all of us independence and then provided us with stooges in all these countries in Africa. And those countries went on to have pseudo independence, not really true independence. So those leaders have gotten significantly old, and there's been this attempt to continue to bring in the young generation to that share the philosophy of the West and hegemony, basically selling out the people to replace them. If you take, for example, Burkina Faso, when Blaise Compaoré was oust. They use Paul Damiba, to oust Blaise Compaoré, and Damiba was supposed to continue to do the job that Blaise Compaoré had been doing. So, but unfortunately for him, through that struggle, you that ushered in Ibrahim Traoré, and then you go on to a place like Mali. They brought in the previous president in Mali who was doing the same work for the hegemon, and he took over. Assimi Goita went on with the young president, colonel, took over as well. Then in same situations, they planned the same kind of coup d'état that happened in Gabon. This time they were successful in replacing the previous Gabonese president with the new person, Bryce Olingue. And then you move on to same thing with Niger, where they brought in the previous the guy in Niger. So the whole plan was to take away the old guard and then replace them with the same set of people that were going to protect the interests of the West.
Mhm.
But we've gotten to a place where the fight, like you talked about, um, us young people in Africa have gone to a place where we said we couldn't have this anymore. We could not have a situation where our people were traversing the Mediterranean Ocean and dying in the sea trying to get to what is the so-called greener pastures. So that helped establish the current environment that is happening now in the Sahel region. Now, you still have countries that are still controlled by the hegemon, countries like Ivory Coast and even Nigeria. In the middle of all of these changes that are happening, you see Nigeria, that is a giant of Africa. You would expect them to be doing a lot more, but because they are under that pressure, under the yoke of the hegemon, they are still doing the work of the hegemon. You have the president in Ghana, Nana Kufu,
Oh, yeah.
doing exactly the same thing. The president of Senegal, Macky Sall, doing exactly the same thing. So, in as much as we've had that significant progress within just a short space of time, there is still a lot of work to be done. And in recognizing the work that has so far been accomplished just within a very short space of time, I would let you come in to jump in and maybe talk about the impact that Russia, or the help, that assistance that Russia has provided to pave the way for such an environment to occur, so that way these guys can have a solid footing in ushering in that struggle that not only Ambazonia now faces, but these other countries.
You know, there has always been a particular narrative that has been shaped, and it went right deep into our psyche, that we must have to act in a certain manner, respond in a certain manner to please the imperialists and the neocons, the hegemony that you're talking about, the Western hegemony. It was like an unwritten, a law that we cannot trade with any type of partner. And there were tools in place that were being utilized in ensuring that we cannot act in a certain manner. We must stay shackled on the chains. Talking about Mali, as you said, Mali is the epicenter of this seismic shift across West Africa. And if you realize the issue with Mali, when they overthrew the so-called the puppet, the neocon puppet there, Assimi Goïta did not even want to go to power.
Right.
He had to, under the advice and of Jerry Rawlings, if you remember very well, they went to Ghana. Nana Akufo was the president, and that's the only country after that they had gone in Africa. After which they have now, I think Assimi Goïta has gone to Russia, but the only African country he visited under that pressure was Ghana, and he went to Ghana specifically to talk to Jerry Rawlings. They advised him, don't sit on that chair. There will be a lot of eyes on you. Hand it over to someone a military civilian that you trust. Then you go down and do the work that you need to do to cleanse your country. But still, because of the interwoven hands of France in particular, manipulating Africa, they wanted to plot to take out the structure, the revolutionary structure that are set up in Mali from Guinea, from Guinea Conakry. They had a meeting there with Alpha Coney. He called for a meeting for the revolutionary or the transitional government. He called for a meeting there. The plot was to pull out all of Assimi Goïta's tools that he had put in place in Mali. They plotted that in Guinea Conakry.
Guinea Conakry.
Yes. So when they came back, he had gotten wind of what was being plotted. He had to organize this because people were asking, why did you have two coups? He organized the second coup and sat at the helm of the seat. That's why he had the second coup, because he knew they were trying to foil it. And you know very well how rocky it was when he sat on the seat. The French said all sorts of things. They threatened him. They were
Right.
doing. He said, "No, you guys have to leave my country." Can you imagine that he
Right.
was saying, "I want to talk to the people who call themselves terrorists in the Sahel, the Tuaregs,"
Yeah.
and the Europeans were telling him that you are not supposed to talk to terrorists. He said, "But you are dictating to me all my."
Exactly, and they're Malians.
Yeah, the Tuaregs are Malians. They are my people. They are not. They are disgruntled. I want to solve the problem. Why are you Europeans telling us that we are not supposed to talk to terrorists? And they were the ones dictating. And you know, the shocking thing is that back there, we had the Germans. I never knew the Danish. Nearly all the EU members.
They all had their military presence there.
Yeah, and
France
I've been there for over 8 years, 8 to 10 years.
Exactly.
Things kept on getting worse. Compared then, the past 10 years, and now in Mali. Mali is more safer.
Just under like a year and a half.
Yes.
Compared to 8 years with all the military power, military might that they had.
You know, the game plan was for them. They thought they were going to still come and try to topple him. Because, you know, Mali is extremely rich in mineral resources up in the northern part where the Tuaregs are occupying.
Yeah.
The game plan was move into Niger, sit there, and organize. I'm trying to bring in Russia and organize any form of military takeover, overthrow of the government, or create more chaos from there.
Exactly.
That was the game plan.
And they were trying to, and if that did not succeed, they were trying to split Mali.
Yes.
Between that northern part called the Zawad region.
Yes.
Because if you remember, towards the end, when the Malian forces were moving towards taking out Gao and Timbuktu, which are all located in the Zawad region, they started to call the terrorists like secessionists. These were people that were previously
called terrorists.
Yeah, exactly.
Then the Europeans started calling them secessionists.
Just to try to use that to legitimize their force.
Yes. And you know, that was a game plan. But Goita was very smart because he had seen how Russia and the Wagner forces had operated in Central Africa. And he knew that they put a checkmate on France in Central Africa. So that's why he had to connect with Russia immediately. After he was pushing them out, they went and pitch camp in Niger. He connected immediately. That's what Wagner forces started coming in. So that's when the French were crying. The Europeans were crying because that would be a big game changer. Yes. So I know we have a lot to touch on. Let me not be lower that fact because you're telling me how to bring. Now, when the Wagner came in, they didn't just come in with their military, their expertise and whatever. They came in also with intelligence to cover their sphere of influence and provide them all the necessary intelligence, and that really helped them in being able to dislodge nearly all the terrorist cells and the rebels that they were creating, the jihadis that they had in the northern part of the country, you know. And then Burkina Faso that you touched, Henry came in, but Henry wasn't, because Henry came in under the guise that he was going to create a safe space for their country. But when he came in, I think he started undergoing some challenges with the handlers, the Westerners. And the people also they were pressuring him that you talked about us being more safe, but it got worse. So what's going on? That is what triggered in Ibrahim Traore to come in and say, you're not doing what you promised our people. You're not giving us any form of safety and security. That's why he pushed him out. And at the same time, he started copying the handbook of Mali to also bring in Wagner forces to help train his forces, bring in Russian expertise to help build his military and strengthen him to the level that he is now capable. They are capable of flushing almost those how to call it? They call them jihadis, but I will still say Western-backed insurgents. That is it, because there's a history of those insurgents being trained by Westerners to continue to create chaos amongst us, because they thrive the most in chaos. When all these things were happening between Niger and Mali, my hope, my biggest wish that I was looking at, I said, the moment Niger in particular, that was the kingpin, the moment if Niger can follow suit, then we will see a total transition and transformation across Africa.
Right.
Lucky enough, the gods of Africa, our ancestors spoke, and they took that stance, and they had to flush out the puppet, the new colonialists. You saw, as you rightfully said, you touched on some key elements. Nigeria being a powerhouse, but still under the handlings of the neocons and the imperialists. They had to set them to motion. Nigeria, and his handlers, Tinubu's handlers, started saying that you cannot allow this to happen. You can imagine the amount of sanction that Niger went through, cut off their electricity, stop everything from happening in that country, and was preventing. I mean, they were about to destroy Niger completely, and you cannot expect that Nigeria will be doing that to its own fellow country. And then they gang up with all the ECOWAS countries to punish those three countries. And if you look at that's a revolution, because it's from the ground, from the people. It is not something that you say it's been handled from. No, it's from the people. You get it? So coming into that, and why we are trying to narrate this story, as I said, I brought it in to tell us what is happening, and you were trying to see. Right. The key thing, talking about Russia has played a critical role because they are providing them intelligence, they are providing them training, they are providing logistics, and you are seeing people taking total control of their country. Despite all the economic sanctions, the punitive measure that the West has hit on them, they are a determined people. You will hear university students saying that I will better eat ground and be a free person than live under a type of misery where the air that we breathe is being controlled from outside. We don't have any form of sovereignty. These are university students in Niger saying that, doing that upheaval. So,
right.
Go ahead.
I think, Chief, it is important to recognize some of the strategy because these things will be used against Ambazonia in one point or the other. The strategy that the West usually uses, not just the sanction regime, but also the military regime that, and also the divide and conquer strategy. Now let's look at key examples of what they've done. Historically, there was a time when Russia had attacked or Russia invaded Afghanistan. To quell the poppy trade that was going on there, that was basically coming into its territory at the time. The CIA reached out to Bin Laden, cooperated with Bin Laden, and the Taliban, funded them, provided weapons and everything else that the Taliban used to fight the Russians, and finally the Russians left Afghanistan. The same strategy was used in Libya, where they brought they brought even people from the Middle East, including even the Taliban, all to come and fight Gaddafi. Brought them. France provided air support. The US provided cruise missiles. We're launching them from the Atlantic Ocean into Libyan territory, and all of these so-called terrorists, like the groups that were brought, provided the ground forces that helped defeat the Libyan forces and Gaddafi. Same thing. They've sponsored all these other groups that they're calling terrorists, and the ISIS, and in the Maghreb, and so on, Boko Haram. All of them. I mean, if you think about it, they call them Islamists. Most of these countries we're talking about have a significant majority population that are all mostly Arabs and Muslims. So you cannot have the Muslim terrorists going after Muslim countries to do what? To educate them on what? So essentially, these are terrorists and organizations and institutions that are being used. So this is one of the strategies to destabilize these countries, when they put pressure on them, when they ask you to do something as the president of those countries, of those each of these countries, and you hesitate or you refuse, then basically you get a terrorist attack
Yeah,
overnight. They move all of these forces, provide them with arms, weapons to move towards your capital, put you pressure, and then you fall for it. You do the things that have been asked of you to do, and it's the same thing that originally happened in Mali. They were
yeah,
moving forces towards Bamako. The president of Mali at the time, I think he was Ibrahim Keita,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
requested for air support. That was all that he had requested for. And instead of providing air support, France provided 5,000 troops that were landed, and those troops never left. The troops
Yes.
now then brought in the
The new
Italians,
force,
they brought in
Germans.
Germans, they brought in the
Yeah,
Americans were there. I mean, all of the basically NATO forces then
yes,
invaded Mali, invaded Niger, created. Obviously, there was a military base that had always existed in
hmm,
Burkina Faso pre-independence. That
yeah,
was there, but that was significantly expanded, and all of these institutions started to put pressure on the governments of these countries. And over time, take for example that we all know today that uranium that was being sold in the world market for like $200 a kilo,
yep,
Canadian uranium, which is not of the best quality compared to uranium from Niger, which is much better
Niger,
quality, was
yep,
being purchased from the Nigerian government at 18 cents compared to $200. So that tells you just how much they were getting out of these countries in
yep,
return for pennies on a dollar. So I thought that it was important for us to know that some of these, to understand some of these strategies that are used. When we see you mentioned economic giants like Nigeria, these countries have significant investments in Nigeria.
yeah,
Each time when they put pressure on the Nigerian government, they tell you you have a 300 million population. If we stop you, cut you off of AGOA, then your economy will struggle. If we remove our companies, we put you sanctions. So
yep,
basically, you end up doing the things that they are asking you to do.
to do.
So going back to your earlier point, it makes sense sometimes to recognize the efforts and the support that countries like Russia provided,
Yeah,
because they understand that they too have gone through all these significant sanctions.
yeah,
Very recently, in islands like in Madagascar, there is a territory there that had voted to join part of to become a French territory, essentially. But it was not. I mean, in one of those islands, I can't remember the name. So very recently, I think it's called Como, something or Kotom. I forget.
Comoros.
Yeah, I think that may be it. They have one island that did not join the rest of the other set of islands.
Okay,
So their president had gone to Russia, and Vladimir Putin told him re- um, promised them diplomatic support in getting the other territory to join, so that way they can have a single country. So,
yeah,
but I'm giving this as an example, showing you and our people what the Russians have done overall in going after the hegemon, not just the interest of the hegemon, getting these countries to become independent, getting these countries to stand on their own. So as a result, the countries like the United States have become not so pleased with it. Recently, they have all these other additional sanctions that were placed on Russia in the name of accusing them of having unalive the previous
the
opposition
Russian
leader,
citizen.
the Russian citizen. But meanwhile, I mean, it was basically they were trying to put sanctions based on the activities of Russia, going after not just the interest of the hegemon, including even monetary policy, what is happening with BRICS, and what is happening with them trying to set up a more, not just a unipolar world, but a multipolar world.
Yeah,
Um, so I let you to go. Sorry, please go ahead.
no, it's okay, man. Look, you come to realize that uh, speaking of West Africa, you see, there's something that's happened, a seismic shift. I don't know that it's being triggered by the Ukraine war because the American attention is fully drawn on it. if you look at what happened, because Mali could boldly move to Russia for military aid and security because of, this, you made a very salient point that when you don't dance according to what the hegemon wants you to do, they'll create upheaval and send their rebels to start threatening you towards your capital. This same thing happened in Central Africa.
Right.
They were about a few hundred kilometers to the capital.
Right.
And he turned around and cried. Nobody came. He went to Russia. Russia brought him the Wagner forces and his military. And within the next 2 months, they had flushed over 20 villages, cleansing all those rebels, so-called rebels. It was like a pure cleansing operation. And you remember very well that there was a time when you saw some of these guys coming from Central Africa and moving into the Republic of Cameroon from the east, and with weapons, and they were handing that. People were like wondering that what was happening. That was the work of the Russian forces, together with the car force that they were training and flushing out the so-called rebels that were propped up by France to overthrow them. So that's one of the checkmate that Russia carried out in Central Africa. Mali had to buy into that same game. Now, when you look at going back to West Africa before moving across, the 3 countries, to me, I said that's the epitome of real independence for Africa: Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, because they are claiming their independence from the soil. You have them suspending any gold mining or export of any of those things to put total check on all the raw materials and the resources, because they own it. Their countries were being run by jackals, the multinationals. You get it? I call it not only jackals. They come and they take what they want, give trinkets to the head of to their puppet, and they carry everything away. You were talking about the uranium issue that they were selling, I think a pound or so for 80 euro cents. The same thing, not processed, taken to France, carries it into Europe, and they're selling that same amount for 230 euros. They sell one for not up to €1, 80 euro cents. Then you go and sell it for 230 euros. The same, just transporting into Europe. Now, Niger is one of the fastest growing economy in Africa. Yeah. Just from the austerity measures that they have taken. You get it? That's what they're called. They're claiming their independence in their own hands. And thanks to the unitary structure that I've created, I want you to link what happened, because there is a connection between those 3 countries and the exposure of ECOWAS, what ECOWAS has stood for, and what you think is going to happen to ECOWAS subsequently.
Right. So I think over time, the hegemon had realized that it was easy to control, just like they can. NATO has its offices in the European Union. It is easy to just control all these European Union countries by controlling the European Union.
Yeah.
So with that same arrangement, they opened up a liaison office with the ECOWAS Union. So the European Union has its presence in ECOWAS. Mm-hmm. NATO has its presence in ECOWAS, and the U.S. Foreign Office has its presence in ECOWAS. So, if you ask who provides the majority of the funding in ECOWAS, who provides the majority of funding in the African Union, then you start to see just how much control that happens behind the scenes. So, by keeping all these countries, 14 African countries, you have those in the Central African region and then those in the West African region. By keeping all of them in that union, it is easy to they have a charter which they have a parliament. The parliament is supposed to have conversations and discussions and debates and come up with rules. But then the people that actually make the ultimate decisions are the presidents, who don't even sit in any. But that is who don't sit in any kind of committee or anything of that nature. but that is done on purpose because if you have the NATO and or European Union controlling the presidents, like a remote controlling the presidents, then basically you can push the presidents to take decisions that suit the
Yep.
hegemon. So what previously was happening was you had the ECOWAS. If you remember, ECOWAS tried to come up with the ECO, which was supposed to be their currency. Then it was easy for France to use countries like the Macky Sall and Ivory Coast.
Ivory Coast. Yeah.
Yeah, the guy in Ivory Coast. Oh, I can't just remember his name.
Ouattara.
Ouattara. Yeah, well, Draman Ouattara.
Mhm.
To use Ouattara to kill the whole, because they knew that. For those of you that are not aware watching this today, know that France gets about 500 500 billion
Billion annually.
a year
Mhm.
CFA out of its transactions from what it does with the CFA. The way that it makes that money is through the foreign reserves that it requests of these countries to keep with the French treasury. It uses that money then to invest in the French economy and other European businesses and European economy, and does not report even the interest that the money gets, and then uses the same money and then lends it as if
Back to the people.
yeah, back to the people that actually own the money with interest at very high interest rates. So at the end of the day,
And there is a cap. There is a cap on how much, if you need more than a certain amount of money from your money,
from your
there
money,
is a cap that you cannot surpass it.
exactly.
Yeah, there's a
Exactly.
cap. If let's say they give if the cap is 20 million, but you need 30 million, they will not give you more than 20 million. And even if they give you more than that amount of money, the amount of tax or interest that they're going to request for you to pay, that's they'll already be projecting your future budget for the next year on how to get back that money
But
into
the
this.
money into the
Man, this
sky.
is abuse of the first order.
Exactly, Chief. And I brought that up too, just to indicate just how much they are making by keeping that union together, to the extent that when these other countries then resign from being partners in that union, then the possible effect or impact that it could cause them. Um, in the future, the president, in a recent interview, the president of Cote d'Ivoire actually made it very clear that at some point, not just withdrawing from ECOWAS was the first step, but at some point they're going to witness a situation where they would withdraw from the CFA, they would withdraw from any
The
other
president of you're making the president of Burkina Faso.
Burkina
Ibrahim
Faso.
Traore. Sorry. Yeah,
Right,
sorry.
right.
Just make
Thank
sure
you.
we are correct now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So was making that statement, which indicated that in future, if France is not very careful, just by having these three major economies, I think they have a population of about 90 million
Yeah, 90
individuals,
about 90 billion. Yeah.
about 90 million within this country. That's a huge economy. If they got out of ECOWAS, the possible, not just getting out of ECOWAS, but also from the monetary union, the CFA, the possible. I mean, France is already facing significant economic challenges right now. You
Yep.
have all of these farmers that are going on the street in striking. They are currently going through a recession, just like Germany and the UK has just joined about. The UK declared that they're currently going on a recession. All of them.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So the
Under
possible
recession.
impact on these events could be significant, to the extent that if we're not careful, so we need to continue. I mean, these countries really need to continue that fight, to stand firm, to continue to build their defenses, to the extent that even if they were to use these Boko Haram, ISIS to try to attack them. I mean, sometimes you see the videos that come up, the type of military hardware that these terrorists are armed with or that they're using. You're asking yourself, where do they get
How
this?
did they get to that? How did they get that?
How do they get this? And these
Yes.
things are sold to countries, not to individuals. Not
Yeah.
something that you can just have.
How does it penetrate the system right through to that level? That's the
That
more reason why you bring a very critical point. We don't need foreign military bases in our countries.
we have
don't
to
need
we have to put
We
those
have to do
in
everything
constitution.
possible in Africa to pull out all this. Tell them to go home. How many African military bases do we have in other countries?
In the Amber Constitution, we'll put in something to that
Very
regard.
clear.
It will take like 100% of the votes to ever
Yes,
allow a foreign military to have military
that
bases
would
on
be
the
a
territory.
no-no. We don't want any foreign military presence or military base in our country. If we need training, we'll have the money and the resources to send our forces out for expert training to train there and come back in our territory.
and
If you
then
look
and
at
then
it very
train,
well,
and then train our forces.
yes, and train our forces because we'll have that budget to do that. We don't need military bases because these military bases, foreign military bases in Africa, that is the seed, one of the root cause of all this turmoil. They use them as a means. Can you imagine a country like Ghana? There are sections in Ghana where the Ghanaian president cannot even get into, owned by foreigners, specifically the US. They have areas in Ghana where the Ghanaians don't have access to.
They
We
have
don't know what
taken
gets in there.
they have taken an entire aisle, an entire area of an airport,
Area. Can you
of an
imagine?
airport.
Your country don't know have any. You don't have any sovereignty over that area.
No.
That is that. Tell me, why are we not going to be having all these upheavals in Africa? So, coming to that, because you made a very salient point. Let's dive a little bit deep into the three countries, the three Sahel confederates, breaking off from the ECOWAS. Let's look at first of all what led to their I mean the what let's look at ECOWAS reaction towards the military taking over their countries, and then what has happened till this current moment, and who is winning the real unconditional independence. Is it ECOWAS or the three Sahel countries? Can you expand on that? First of all,
Thank you.
talk on how they were sanctioned, what tools they utilized on those countries, and how they decided to stand together firm, and what is happening currently now. We need to know because we need to draw some lessons and see how we connect that and tie that to Ambazonia.
Yeah, thank you, comrade. I think these countries too, sometimes the universe is very friendly, or the stars align for certain events to work. I say that to imply that if you notice the period where these coups happened, it didn't happen like one in 5 years. They all happened back to back to back to back,
Yep.
which helped them pretty significantly, because then you had the possibility of the reduction of divide and conquer,
Yep.
because these countries were able to pull together. Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso were able to pull themselves together against a huge, massive ECOWAS that came after them.
Mm-hmm.
So the ECOWAS, instead of when these coups happened, like we talked about, the influence of these powers, NATO, European Union, the United States as an individual and the country itself, that were behind the scenes, calling the shots, especially France too, because it's within its sphere of influence per se.
Yes.
Right, calling the shots. So they asked all of the ECOWAS countries to sanction these Confederate States, AES.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
They placed very difficult sanctions on these countries, including even freezing their foreign reserves, freezing access for them to be able to trade. All of these countries do not have access to the sea, so most of their imports come through, say, Ivory Coast or Benin and Togo. So they blocked the possibility of the flow of goods that were coming from overseas into these countries. But there were times when people were dying in the hospital, and not only that, Nigeria, which supplies electricity to countries like Niger, it should baffle all of us that Niger, that produces that amount of uranium, and uranium goes to energy, and uranium goes to producing power, and Niger is located in a place where they can get 24-hour sunlight to power their entire country that did not have the capacity to do this. Nigeria went on to even turn off the electricity. Individuals were dying in hospitals so they looked for every means to put significant pressure. There was no food being sent into these countries. If you remember, well, a lot of times the France has cautioned these countries that they are not able to grow certain types of crops, certain types of,
Yes.
and so they believed it, and
Yeah.
so they relied a lot on other types of food that were shipped from
Ship into,
other
yeah.
in
Made
yeah,
them food dependent.
made them food dependent exactly.
Yeah.
And so when all of these things were blocked, a lot of pressure was put to bear on these three confederate countries, Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. And they stood their grounds. And Russia was very helpful because Russia was
Yeah.
flying in medication to Mali, where they had a lot more connection with. Then Mali would then distribute it to the other countries. Russia was flying in all other types of things that were needed by these countries on air. So over time, they were able to stand up. And what has ended up happening was the president, like the president of Ibrahim Traore, the president of Burkina Faso, pushed for uh, food sus- food sustenance. They
Sustainability.
started food sustainability. They started
Yep.
to grow their own food, grow their own crops. So the amount of economic activity that used to happen between these confederate states, the AES state,
It
and
increased.
the rest of the increased significantly. Um, then compared to the ECOWAS state that were no longer getting all the money that they were getting from the payment of bills for electricity, for the purchase of food that was coming in from the other countries
Economic
and the other
activity.
territories, they were no longer getting it. Shipment that were coming through their shipping port authorities were no longer coming through. This is where we may recognize Guinea Conakry because Guinea kept its port
Yeah.
open to allow shipment to continue to the other places. So Guinea was benefiting now the money that they were getting from custom duties, even though it was a little bit more expensive because of distance,
Hmm.
but they were benefiting. So now these other countries like Nigeria Nigeria that were supplying had a lot of trade with Niger started to struggle because the traders in Nigeria couldn't do business anymore with Niger. Niger was not paying electricity bill anymore because they were not getting electricity. So Nigeria has been struggling. They now get to a place where their economies have been suffering. The money that was promised them to go through the short period of struggle that they were going to take did not come because the European Union too is struggling
Yep.
from economic crisis. Everybody, all of this, so the money did not come. So now they ended up looking at themselves and asking themselves the questions: Is this really worth it? So they get to a place where, as recently as the last couple of days, they've started to look into uplifting all of the sanctions that they had placed. What is interesting to me right now, or funny to me right now, is there has been a conversation, especially in Burkina Faso, whether they are willing to even though the ECOWAS countries have now uplifted the embargo and all of the sanctions, they've taken those off. What is happening in Burkina Faso right now? They are debating whether they should even allow all of those things to continue to come to their country. Um, so, in my opinion, if I were in their place, I would block it to allow trade to flourish first within just as punishment for them for trying to punish us. But at the same time, this would always be your neighbors. You can always find other ways to work with them.
Let me throw in a little bit of more light on that. You know that much of Benin's GDP depended a lot on the trade using their ports
Right.
and moving stuff into those trio, the Confederacy.
Yeah.
Yes, that's one. Besides the normal trade between them, they were also benefiting from goods moving through their ports from Benin into those countries. So, and you also realize that during that era, there has been about a 25 billion pipeline. I think you had one that hinted me between Niger was supposed to pass through Niger, tapping its oil through Benin. That
Right.
was supposed to be going out to the
Atlantic Ocean.
Atlantic. Yes, all those things were put in jeopardy. Um, Another country that also had to suffer this effect, Togo and Mali. Togo ran fast and even uh, regulated his activities in Mali. But before it reached that peak where they were running and trying to beg for this trio, because the trio beat them hands down. That's the trio collapsing. Those three countries are collapsing the ECOWAS because it's a tool used to continue to subjugate our people. Morocco. Do you know Morocco played a very fast one? Not the fast thing. Morocco looked at it when things were really tough. Morocco looked at them and said, "We are brothers." The king of Morocco. He said, "Let's build there's a seaport. We can work together and build a very strong, robust seaport where all your goods can be flowing through that port and you don't have all these shenanigans to deal with." When Morocco signaled that, and there was a meeting and there was a meeting between the four countries, there were papers that were signed, and that project is currently going on now. That's the moment that Benin blinked and knew that will ravish its economy. Togo also blinked and started independently going back against the whole ECOWAS stance that they had taken. And let's not forget, Nigeria was already warming up to send military forces to go and attack Niger. But because the real revolutionaries, they were ready to die for what they believed in. The real revolutionaries, they decided to stick together. That's what I call the spirit of Ubuntu.
Yeah.
If you touch Niger, we are all coming in fully. And that scared the ECOWAS forces. They used to go and crush a small country. They threatened people like
Guinea, Bissau,
Gambia. It's
Gambia.
Gambia.
That's Gambia. Yeah.
They threatened him and he had to leave, but he won. You get it? He won the election, but they didn't want him. Why? Because they were coming after their oil.
Right.
And he refused that you cannot come and give me 5% royalty. I want to take my property over free. And he was giving them hell from the perspective of the alphabet program they were trying to push in Africa. He said, "I'm not going to stand that and don't bring it to my country. We don't believe in that. And also, you're not going to come and extract my resources. It better stays there than you taking that and my people suffering in future. I mean, you give me trinket and they own everything." Because he made a statement once on TV that if you come and you are telling me I'm giving 5% and then royalties, what are you benefiting? They could not tell him. He said, "Then leave it there. We'll figure that out by ourselves." And the resource, because he found a tremendous amount of oil and gas offshore in his country. That's one of these factors that they had to make sure and ensure via ECOWAS, because that is currently being exploited by the hegemony now that we speak. Via ECOWAS.
See what they do. They use us to fight us and then benefit them.
Yes.
Look at the Gambia situation that you're talking about. ECOWAS, they use Nigerian forces were going to be marching over there, and it's not like Nigeria was going to benefit any. I mean, what is Nigeria's interest in the whole situation to go out the president? Nothing.
Of Niger. They're going to die there, kill their own brothers. For whose benefit?
For whose benefit, indeed. And with how armed Mali was at this point, I mean, Mali has significant air power right now.
Yes,
they could go into say Victoria Island in Nigeria there and just drop a couple of bombs. And what does Nigeria? Who loses?
Nigeria loses.
Nigeria loses, and Africa loses.
You get the point. And then besides that, you realize that it didn't end there. The checkmate that Niger gave Nigeria. Okay, with all what you have done to me, we are not going to fly across my airspace. Do you know how much that was supposed to cost Nigerians? Because they can't fly from Europe. True, Niger is a very big country. They'll have to navigate out of their airspace, increasing the fare.
The cost, yeah.
You get it? They increase the cost. So it is not only, you don't talk only about, I will do this, but you don't know that the people also have the means and the ability to also hurt you. It is strange that people will sit like the ECOWAS, the guy who's the head of the ECOWAS or the chair of the ECOWAS, this one guy who is very rough,
arrogant. Yeah, I remember the guy.
Arrogant person. we are going to do this. We have time in our hands. We are going to do everything possible to crush them. Your own people. How does it concern you? When they organize coups, coup d'etats, constitutional change of government is constitutional coup. What Alassane Ouattara did in Ivory Coast, that was a constitutional coup. Do you see ECOWAS talking about that? What Macky Sall was trying to do in Senegal, did you see ECOWAS talking about that? No. What Paul Biya, okay, Paul Biya is not part of West. But what the guy in Togo,
yeah,
what he has been doing, switching and changing constitution as he wants, and do you see them reacting towards that? No, because it's a puppet of the hegemon.
Right.
And then when you see people really fighting on their heart and soul their country, you say you want to step in and fight them. No, so you realize that technically, as you said, those trio, they might decide they're the ones to play the card the way they want. They have survived the heat. They can decide. You see the guy Pascal Talon from Benin, he went and was trying to plead with them, making statements. Oh, they are brothers. Where were you when they were really they were dying? You were part of it because it has affected your economy. Now you call them brothers because you see what you're gonna lose. Because they can decide and continue do what they were trying to do with Morocco, Togo. And if I were them, I'll continue it in that light. And even if I need to use your own Paul, like the Guinea, the Benin, and those other countries, I'll do it at 1/3 of the price I was supposed to. If you don't want it, you leave it. I have my other options. You get it? So that's technically they are fighting for the heart and soul of even they were facing darker days. Those 3 countries, suspending them, freezing their accounts, stopping food from going to their countries. Their people stood together because they knew what they were fighting for. This is a lesson for Ambazonians. We have everything that it takes to win our independence. Not this little shocked. Let's realize one thing. I want to use particularly before we move into other point of discussion.
Yes.
Ambazonia started with 10 guns. We have upgraded to a level where Liberia Cameroon is openly attesting that we have come to a point where it is like an impasse. We have gone to that level to be able to stand and challenge Liberia Cameroon man to man, then they cannot win us in the battle.
And we already think about the next generation of equipment that will be deployed.
Yes, that we're going to bring in. You get it? They have attested that they cannot win us in this battle. All we need to do is to believe in ourselves. They used to kill us when we had 10 guns. Now we have upgraded to real fight military weapons. We chase them, we gun them down it's our territory. We know our terrain. We are at the point, we have what a lesson we can learn from countries like Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso is that they have the capability. They have shown that independence means independence. They were ready to die for anything and to maintain their integrity. At this point in time, they have come to a place where, they are beating and defeating the Westerners. So we as Ambazonia have to understand that we have the ability and the capability in challenging them. Chairman, just control that is in that light. Let me handle something and come.
Okay. Yeah. So our people need to know that we cannot continue to sit and fold our arms. We have the opportunity these days where there is this, what I refer to as a seismic shift, where every country is asserting its independence, to be able to stand on its feet, to be able to exercise its God-given rights to make its own decisions and determine its own destiny. We are at that point where we are very close to the finish line. But we cannot do that when people are standing by the sideline or giving up.
Yep.
We need to behave like what these guys have done to, like the Malians, standing, understanding that there are better days, making the sacrifices today, knowing that there are better days ahead, standing strong, building alliances like the alliances that we've built with, like the people of our brothers of the Biafra, because sometimes you need those alliances in order to make yourself stronger. That is why there have been conversations about Ambazonia, even in the international community, in so many regards, because they're recognizing how such alliances can even expand. And when they do expand, they become even stronger and giving us what the CIC had referred to as making us a contender.
Yep.
In that case. So going back to the AES, the Confederacy, they've gotten to a point where they would only continue to build on the foundation that they've laid on during these last few years.
Yep.
There also arises the need for us to find a way that we can even tap into their experiences, tap into what we can do better, create even alliances that we may get maybe advice or capacity building, working with them. So those are things that we will continue to think about as we think about the next subject matter to move into.
Yeah. So, and let just closing that section, as you rightfully said, we have to understand how the tenacity, what they went through, economic embargo, economic blockade, energy, freezing, but they said independence means independence. We are going to fight, even if we die in that process. You see, university students were enrolling to fight if there was threat in their sovereignty when Nigeria was threatening to get into their country. You see, they had that decision that they have taken steps, the steps of the unknown, but they knew that they were fighting for one thing: freedom and independence. And they are where they are now. I can say that they are defeating ECOWAS, defeating the hegemony, because ECOWAS has blinked.
Right.
They have blinked.
That's why they're canceling. That's why they're canceling all of these embargoes and sanctions that they previously had.
Yeah.
Over these confederate countries.
Yeah. It just shows that when you have a determination and you know what you are fighting for, stand by it, even in pains. What matters is the end. You at the end, you will prevail. Ambazonia is at that crossroads. We believe a lot in what we are fighting for. The detractors from within, paid agents, the weak-minded should not deter us, nationalists, from what we are fighting for. Those people fought for their sovereignty and they have succeeded. And you look at it very well, this is going to even collapse, and this is the beginning of the end of ECOWAS. The hegemon 2 is the beginning of the end of it. Because if you look at it very well, even if you ever hear this trio have to join ECOWAS, they will join on their own terms. The revival of ECOWAS, we've heard how Ibrahim Traore is talking about, and Tiani, the guy from Niger, they are talking about creating their currency. When they give that hint, we should know that it is almost at the finishing phase.
Right.
They cannot come and they are saying it, knowing fully well that if it's just a thought, the evil jackals, the imperialists, will come after and destroy it. So they are almost at the closing phase. You can imagine them coming up with a currency. And I believe very much that they are fast. I mean, they are almost at that point. That's why you see them struggling as much as possible to amass a lot of their resources and wealth, like the gold. They are creating gold because they want to use it as a tool to back their currency. The same platform, the same solutions, the same possibility that Gaddafi was giving Africans. Let's make the gold dinar our African currency. That's why you see Mali building a gold refinery, Burkina Faso building a gold refinery, because the game plan is to build that, to have a currency that's backed by gold.
Backed by gold.
Yes.
They can exploit their gold and then
Yes.
use it to back their currency.
Their currency with, yes. So you see, we are seeing now, because their currency is more of commodity-backed currency. You cannot crumble it. You cannot easily destroy it. That's the light that they are going towards. This is really how they are defining their independence. You see, Ibrahim Traore is talking. I mean, they have transformed their agricultural system. You know, just like what this man used to do, Sankara. He transformed his country from a country that's importing food to a country that was able to export food 4 years later. They have the capability to do that. So Ambazonians should understand that we are not a unique case. There are people that have shown us that we can do it. If we believe in our cause and in ourselves, we should not bother about the distraction from the enemy itself. We understand and we must measure our enemies. We are not only fighting the Republic of Cameroon. We are fighting France. So we should always have that in mind and not pretend about it. Gives us a further determination to fight. The other countries are fighting the French. Those trio are fighting the French and the jackals, the imperialists, and they are breaking ground. They are making strides and moving forward. Ambassadors should only be fully determined and focused on what we are fighting for, with the belief and hope that we will win. That's
exactly. Exactly. And Chief, let me add to what you're saying before you continue that Burkina Faso has these forces that it calls VDP, which in its French acronym means the Volontaire pour la défense de la patrie.
Yeah.
Meaning the volunteers that are defending the motherland.
Yeah.
We need to all assume such posture where if we are not volunteering to defend, to be on ground zero and defending ourselves, defending our territory, then we should be volunteering for all other ways, participating in one way or the other, whether it's fundraisers, whether it's providing so that at the end of the day, we are all pulling our resources, pulling our own, doing our own bit towards the support of. We should recognize the fact that we are at war. Sometimes that we forget that we are in a fight, a struggle for our freedom, a struggle for our future, a struggle for the future of our children and our children's children. Sometimes we forget. We think these things were handed to us in a platter of gold. No, we have to put in the effort. We have to put in the fight. We have to put in to harness all of our resources together to make sure that we support those that are holding the guns, support those that do our own bit to that aim, to that effort.
Before you move on to the next topic on touching on AU, because the question is, what is AU? It sounds as African. Before we go to that, there's one last thing I want to make as far as touching on this last topic is concerned. When you look at what bringing on the aspect of us contributing wholeheartedly in the defense of motherland, when you look at what is happening in the diaspora, Europe, Canada, United States, those three heavy diaspora, because that's where we can harness that money to change the destiny of our country. There is a dynamic that I just want us to touch on before we go ahead. There is a rise in the ultra-right movement, heavily. And when you hear of ultra-right, those are people who don't like foreigners. Those are people who don't like migrants. There's a rise in the far right and ultra-right. Anything can happen in the Western world. We've seen it played out in Germany. We've seen it played out in Europe. Those traces are still currently present in the Western world. We've seen during the 21st century how there was an attempt to weaponize the media and confront Russians globally. there was a Russophobic, gameplay being attempted to be played globally. I still call on Ambazonians, wherever we are. We might feel so comfortable, but we should look at history. The only place we can feel safe and free is our homeland. That's the only thing that we have that we can call ours. The shit can hit the fan wherever we are, where there will be a scramble to live wherever we are, that we think we are comfortable with. Where are we going to go to? So when we tell Amazonians to contribute, look, we see, even before the war, the Israel-Palestine war, the Jews, wherever they live globally, they know that if the shit hit the fan, they're running back to Israel. They have that safety net. Us Amazonians, what do we have? To live in a free and wallow back in slavery? That's what we tell Amazonians to contribute for freedom of motherland. Some of them take it for granted. As long as you're out of your country, nothing is safe.
I mean,
we are in a Western world, we know nothing is safe and secure. The only thing you have that is safe and secure in your life is your homeland.
It's your homeland.
Yeah.
Just yesterday, or was that a few days ago, the Secretary of State of this country was making a speech talking about how the United States can take on Iran, can take on China, Russia, all at the same time. I'm thinking to myself, they haven't won any war in the last maybe 100 years. Most of the time, they pick up their stuff and escape when it becomes very difficult, like they just recently did in Afghanistan.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I brought that up too is in support of what you just said. Imagine picking up a war against Russia right now, or combine Russia, China, and Iran in it. Right now, the United States has these all-volunteer armed forces. There may come a time when it will come to a situation where it becomes a draft. What that means is that they just call you up to join the military, because at that time they've been fighting these easy wars like just going around bombing Yemen, bombing Libya, all these little guys. Now imagine a war with China or a war with Russia. That would not
call for a draft.
The call for a draft, and at that time, that's when you start to think about homeland.
That's the point.
You're not the ratio of kills in just the Ukrainian war has been 1 Russia to about 15 Ukrainians. Imagine fighting such a war of attrition with the United States or with China. So then that calls for a draft. At that point, it gets a point where we move from a conventional warfare to maybe a nuclear warfare.
Sure.
No, this place would not be safe if you're fighting Russia or China.
That's why we keep on telling our people they don't see the writings on the wall. We keep on telling our people that let's free homeland so that we can go and make homeland our place.
So at any time you decide to go homeland,
that's the safest place that you can have.
Yeah.
We have to call it as it is. Because the way things are going, technically, if homeland were safe, I don't think I would like to live in the West. I fight tooth and nail because I want to go back home. I want to go back home. I want to settle back home in my own homeland. Just be there. Whatever you are experiencing out of your homeland, there is we talk of, because that's why we fight to create safety and security for us and for our own people back home. Yeah. But Ambazonians might be thinking that what you are saying, that is just something that can happen in the next minute. It is not far. I will start asking, had I known, I would have fought hard to free homeland. Maybe before they even start talking about this, I would have been homeland. But you'll be late. And then you have to go and fight a war physically when you would have contributed in freeing your own homeland and save your own people. Those are things that people feel they don't see, but that is when you analyze something and tell them, you put it out clear for people to see what it is. Okay, touching on that aspect, you see that's what I'm saying, that the rise of alt-right, it is showing that technically where they don't like migrants, they don't like people like us, so we have to look for a place. We have to try to create our own safe niche, and it's our territory. Okay, talking about AU, let's go into this aspect of talking about the AU. Now, the question has come in several times. Why can the AU not do anything for us? So, what can you say about that?
That is a very
the AU.
yeah, that is a very good question because the hegemon has his footprints all over the place.
Yep.
When you go to the AU, they have a liaison office. If you run a search for NATO and liaison office in the AU, you will see it there. Whenever they're not even present, they sometimes don't need to be present. There is a concept where when you train a slave master, as a slave master, you no longer have to be there. That's the other slave person that you put in charge, then does the work even better than you.
Overseer.
The overseer ends up doing the work better than you even do.
Yep.
So they've put in all these overseer. The guy, I think, is Mohammed. What is his name? Faki, Mohammed Faki.
Yep.
The guy. I mean, that is one of their what is the term you just used?
Overseer.
The overseer. Thank you. That's one of the overseer right there. See how long it took for the African Union to, as a continent, to even make a statement regarding what is going on. The African Union was quiet with what was going on in Palestine and Israel. No statement. It was not until recently that they at least wanted to say something because of what South Africa has done.
Yep.
So unfortunately, the African Union is not there for the interest of the African countries.
Yeah.
We've had people like Julius Malema that has criticized them in so many regards about the fact that they are basically sitting there. They don't look after the interest of the Africans. The foreign secretary or the foreign secretary of South Africa has made the same statement.
Yeah.
To the extent that they will at some point even withdraw from the African Union if need be, if they found out that their interest was not being looked after through that platform. The lady, the foreign secretary of South Africa, she was actually very angry at one point when they had brought as observer status Israel's presence within the African Union without even consulting the member states, just brought in an Israel as an observer. So the African Union. So what I would like Ambazonians to know is not only the African Union. The IMF itself is basically controlled by the Americans. The World Bank is controlled by the Americans because the way that it is set up by the more contributions that a country, based on the size of your economy, based on the size of based on the size of your economy and the contributions that you make, then you have certain number of seats within these particular places like the IMF and the World Bank. Because of the way that you also would contribute in terms of, because the way that the lending works at the World Bank, you find a country when the World Bank is lending you money, it's essentially a country that is behind that funding that provides the money. Okay. So they end up having influences that will then determine the type of calls that they make. They ask for your country to do this, do that. If you do not do it, you don't get the money because the hegemon is the one pretty much providing that money. But the interesting thing is that a lot of times this money is just printed. These are just papers that is just printed. It's not really backed by anything, by just the fact that it is the United States. So we're gonna get to a point where that's why the AES, I support the fact that they are pushing towards having currency that is actually backed by a commodity or backed by some solid assets like gold behind. So going back to the African Union, we should know that all of these organizations look out after their own interests. And you even have the European Union. The European Union has been towing the line with what the Americans say because they too are afraid of sanctions. America has been going around sanctioning everybody. I mean, even recently with the event that happened in Russia regarding the Russian citizen that was killed, they sanctioned China because China, according to them, is supporting Russia. So,
logically, it's just like shooting yourself on the foot.
Shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah, because China has tools to also hit the US with. Currently, that's a fact. Economic tools. They have done that
China,
several times.
absolutely.
And
China holds over how many percent of U.S. Treasury bills?
yeah,
If they basically sell off, that the U.S. economy will tumble.
even besides that, there are certain how to call it. There are certain areas of the U.S. economy that is being supported or provided that provide certain particular assets to some of those U.S. companies or private sector. Some private sectors in the U.S. depend solely a lot on what comes from China, and also depend on the Chinese market. So there are tools that
Absolutely.
the Chinese can also utilize in hitting hard on, the U.S. So at times, some of these things, just like shooting yourself. I mean, we've seen this play out in a couple. I mean, about 20 decades, about 20, within for the past 2 decades, we've seen that play.
Right.
Not touching on that, as you said, the AU itself. Can you imagine the EU has a seat in the AU?
Right.
The US have representatives in the AU.
The AU.
The AU is being sponsored by the EU and the West.
Right. Over
Then
80%
tell me,
of its
yeah,
budget.
yeah. EU, France has a heavy hand in EU. So do you think taking our case to the AU, sponsored by those people, is going to help our case? Until that AU reform and Dr. Arikana Chirumbai and Pierre Lemu has been pushing hard. AU needs reform. The AU that Gaddafi left behind has been transformed into a tool against the Africans. Until it reforms to become an organ that serves Africans, it is a useless tool and counterproductive to Africans. How many crises has AU solved? My other thing, almost next to zero. Before we go on, and so we cannot depend on AU for now. I think that the area that we can even be looking at is the Pan-African Parliament. It might be the ones that can be able to make a statement or push for our cause in Ambazonia, not the AU. And then moving from that, before we touch on to how to call it, Palestine, Ukraine, and then other aspects. When you look at the AU itself, it's being humiliated globally. South Africa is playing the role of AU. They are the ones playing the role of what AU is supposed to be doing. The question is this. Technically, there are things that were supposed to be addressed about the continent in AU. The recent meeting that they had. And those things were not addressed. Aspects like, is this element of divide and rule? Anybody has the jackals, the imperialists, everybody has his own sphere. There was a time, even within the Pan-African Parliament, Julius Malema had to raise a lot of dust because they were trying to project and push something that was good for the Africans. But the French Francophonie bloc was trying to block it because they were representing the French interests. Exactly. And Julius Malema had to call them out. Are you representing African interests or your colonial master's interests?
Exactly.
He asked them, he called them out. So AU is useless. I know I'm looking
quite often, if you have a president that is a stooge, that president nominates a representative that is equally a stooge to go represent the country.
He's even selected he's even selected by the puppet masters.
By the puppet master through the embassy. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. We need this one to go there. We need that one to be the person. Just like in the case like we saw in Ukraine. Zelensky was selected. There were audio that came out that there were people in the US that selected Zelensky.
Zelensky was selected.
That's their man. You get it. So it's not surprising for us to see that what is happening in Africa. So AU is useless. We can't really depend on AU. We have to keep on fighting. That's the truth. And no matter what, like the statement, let me go to the statement before we touch on those other two aspects. You see, let me go back to the statement, and it should continue to resonate amongst all of us Ambazonians. A slave that does not rebel deserves no pity. We didn't come to this world to be laughing stocks. We didn't, as Ambazonians, we are solely and openly aware of the oppression and the abuse of our land and our people. We understand very well that before the Republic of Cameroon even encroached into our territory, how wealthy we were, our economic stance, how we were progressing economically. These people grounded everything to dust. Even when we still struggle to build and destroy, we still struggle to build and destroy because they want to continue to contain and keep us. Now, there are two choices we have as Ambazonians. Decide to remain as slaves, because there's no in between. When the founding fathers of America were making the choice to fight, they said, give me liberty or death. And they fought and stood on that. And they are a free nation. Ambazonians should be able to take that particular stance. There is no in between. Total independence, or we choose to remain slaves. There's no in between. We are the nationalists. They'll give us independence or death. We'll keep on fighting. The ideology has already been implanted and impeded in our children. That's the face and that's the position that we are taking. We are with the stance we are taking. Now let's touch on. So yeah, sorry, just closing on AU. AU is a no-go.
We cannot rely on them because of the influence of the hegemon. And one other thing that I would add to that, which we touched on a little bit before we go to what you're about to say, Chief, is the fact that a lot of times there is all this conversation about the Jefferson democracy, liberal democracy, based on the Jefferson style freedom. George Washington had, even though they were good architects in writing the Bill of Rights.
Yeah,
there were George Washington and Thomas Jefferson. All of those guys came together and wrote all this constitution that professes they were all slave owners.
Yeah.
So these people are not out there to give you freedom. The fight is for you, us as Ambazonians, to fight for our own freedom. Yeah. Nobody's gonna have pity on you. Nobody's gonna come and give you freedom. That fight rests on you.
Yes, there is no. Don't expect that someone will look at you and pity you. Oh, yeah. No. That's the truth that people have to understand as Ambazonians. The independence that we long for and wish for, it's not true pity. We should understand that the world don't care if the massacres all. We should be at a point where we have beaten like Republic of Cameroon completely and erased most of the structure all out of us. The time that people come to recognize you is when you have shown that you have control. I mean, physical control of your territory.
That you're a contender.
Yeah, you're a contender. And if we have gone to the level of having an impasse with the Republic of Cameroon, that is a big progress that we have made. We have to continue to step it up. Economic embargo, economic sabotage. We've reached a point where mark plate in our territory is a taboo. That is something that was unheard of. We have come this far as Ambazonians. We have put in a lot of resistance. We've done a lot of work. More still has to be done. We have proven that we have the capability to free our land and free ourselves from these people. We have the capability. It's just the commitment that we need from our people. And we'll get it done. Comrade, when you look at the last phase of our communication, of our topic, I know we've gone for a while, the last phase of our discussion is what this originated from: resistance. Palestine. I know it will have a little bit of touch. We'll touch a little bit on Russia, but Palestine. With all what is happening in Palestine, how can you put that? How can you bundle that and relate it to the Ambazonian struggle?
Right.
How can you bundle what is going on now between Palestine and Israel? How can you make that tie down to create a same parallel with our situation?
Yeah, comrade. You have a situation where about 1945, after the Second World War, when Hitler was basically killing the Jews, um, a location is found for the Jews in the Middle East, in this case on Palestinian territory. Palestinians are supposed to take a few of the refugees that are coming in from Europe, and these refugees come in, not a few, but a lot of them. Britain is the colonial power at that time over the territory of Palestine. And the Jews that have moved to the Palestinian lands then begin like terrorist activities, attacking the British, and they get to a point where the British are now concerned and worried. And instead of granting independence, because Palestine was a mandated territory, instead of granting Palestine its independence, that independence is transferred to the Jews through the Balfour Declaration. Now, the parallel with that too is a situation where you have Ambazonia, southern Cameroons, where it's a mandate, uh, the trusted territory of the United Nations under the British. And instead of granting independence to the Ambazonian nation, then that independence becomes something. To get independence, you have to either join Nigeria, or to get independence, you have to join La République du Cameroon. And the people are now forced to have some kind of a confederate arrangement with La République du Cameroon. And La République du Cameroon, instead of maintaining that kind of arrangement, then slowly they start to annex, just like the state of Israel has slowly been annexing the Palestinian territory over time. So there is some kind of a parallel there. Now you still have a situation where they've not done so through peaceful means or through negotiations, and that is how the Jews have also done. The Jews, they thought might is right, using the power of the weapons that are provided from the West, primarily the United States, to get this done. So there is a significant parallel between the situation which is happening in Palestine's with the Jews, just like what is happening in Ambazonia with La République du Cameroon. So that's why I tend to wear this, which is a symbol of resistance from oppression, symbol of resistance when you have another power that comes in and tries to take away your land, take away your freedom, try to impose upon you their traditions of bribery and corruption, try to impose upon you their educational system, which is based on one which is not for you not to think individual thought, but more reliance on what the colonial master tells you that Christopher Columbus discovered America. Meanwhile, people were already living there. Those kinds of things that get fed to you. So there is a parallel right there that we see. Now you have a situation where the Palestinians are now do not have any choice but to fight. And from since 1948, when they were displaced, a lot of them, over 700,000 of them, with about 200,000 pushed to what is today Gaza, because Gaza was it's a population of refugees that left the West Bank initially before that were pushed there to create space for the Jews that were coming in from Europe. So since 1948, these people have been fighting. We are only in really truly in the last 5 years. The first 2 years we were still trying to find ourselves using din guns and stuff. So I think we need to give the Palestinians a lot of credit and to borrow from them or to buy from them that kind of stick to it tenacity, stick to
Yeah.
it, steadfastness,
Yeah.
staying the course.
Yeah.
I mean, every day these people are subjected to every kinds of humiliation and every kinds of their territory, their homes are seized and broken. I mean, listen to the words that are used whenever a settler comes in and takes away their home. It is like a demolition per se. They don't use words like the settler actually came in and took away homes. But these people have stood the course. They've been fighting since 1948 through the 1968 war to the war that they're currently not necessarily war. You can have a situation where one person is just bombing the other, but
Mhm.
they've been resisting this oppression. So we have a lot to learn in that regard. I mean, to stick the course. I mean, we're not going through even half of or a third of what they're going through. Yet,
Even 10%,
10% of what they're going through, even 5% of what they're going
5%. Yeah.
through.
And then
So,
some of us are crying and saying that no, those are lessons that we need to learn. Until today, they are still fighting for freedom. More than 75 years ago, till today, they are still fighting for freedom. And the world is waking up. There is a conscience globally. Look at what is happening there. Amazonians, we have not even started. We
not
haven't
even started.
of what they have gone through. And the good thing about it is that we have gone to a point where we are matching the enemy toe to toe. That's how advanced we have even gone in Ambazonian cases. And some people are crying that, they don't see. No. We have to look at people that have, these guys, Israel has the biggest military power backing it. But the Palestinians, with almost next to nothing, they have not given up that hope and that light to fight for what they truly own, their land, their freedom. So Ambazonians should look at it from that perspective. You've drawn a clear narrative between our situation and what Palestine is going through. Just like we were talking about, look at what is happening. We're talking about settler colonization. We are also experiencing in Ambazonia. They were creating a chiefdom from the western province within the Bamenankwe section, where that area was being covered and given by the Cameroon to people from western province to create a chiefdom in that area. Look at Limbe. The SGO who will reign in those critical areas, because most of the SGOs are from Liberia, Cameroon. They'll take the best part of your land, bring in their own people, and give those lands at times for free or next to nothing to settle and build in those areas. That is what we have been experiencing settler colonization. And they take the best land. Go to Limbe. In some areas in Limbe, they are speaking French. And when they speak, they sound so superior to you. They speak to you even in your own homeland in a condescending manner.
You think they're better than you?
Better than you. You go to some certain offices, even in language that we even took, and we said, okay, this is our own language, English. If you cannot speak French, they will not serve you. That is purely settler colonization. Look, those are the parallels we draw. Like what is happening in Israel? They use bulldozers, break areas, bring settlers, plant them, they build houses and keep them there. Keep on encroaching people's land. Then when those SGOs come into our own territory, they pick and choose who to sell those places to. So they get their own people to settle in those places. And then you sit there. The best part of your land is given to people for almost free, almost nothing. And then tell me is that not settler colonization?
It is settler colonization, and what we should draw, we should make a clarion call to Ambazonians too about the fact that this is actually even going to get worse if we do not get to a place where we can take our land back. because they are going to recognize the fact that they need to accelerate this whole process as part of their strategy towards weakening our resolve,
Yeah.
bringing in more settlers, so that way in future we will not be able to fight. So
Yes.
this,
No, I'm sorry that I know that it's still in the works, but we just have to, based on this topic, it is still in the works internally within the backbone of this revolution. They are working it through and they will send it out as a policy. The idea of residence permit to make people understand that you don't own our land. We own it. We are working on that. And it's very clear. That's step one in reminding the settlers that we own that land. I know that the policymakers within the Gulf Sea, they are working to craft out, and there will come a time that they're going to put it out, where settlers in Ambazonia will have to pay residence permit. That is how you define the fact that you don't own Ambazonia as a settler. It is our land, our heritage. Them trying to apply the settler colonization strategy will circumvent that with the next phase of what we intend to implement: residence permit for foreigners in our land. Because we have to remind them that they are foreigners in our territory. They don't own our land. And that particular aspect we will have to roll out. I'm just giving a tip to our people to start preparing their minds for that. Because there is a clear parallel between what is going on with us and what is going on in Palestine and Israel. We can't see oppression. It's just like Luther King said, if you oppress me, any form of oppression globally. Now there's a particular saying that he said, the fact that the fight for oppression in the United States of America is not only limited to oppression of a nation. Any form of oppression globally, they'll fight on the same and equal terms. Same like Nelson Mandela. That's why he always took a stance that if Palestine is under oppression, the job that they started in Israel, in South Africa, yeah, it's not completed till Palestine is free. So when you look at certain things, the lesson that you listed out that Ambazonians have to draw from Palestine is that they are said to the last Palestinian is dead, they'll keep on fighting. They fight for what they own. You get it? So what is the connection between what is happening in Palestine and you look at the world hypocrisy? Can you look at Palestine, the narrative on Palestine and the narrative on Russia and Ukraine? What can you say about that?
Right, and that goes back to some of the conversation that we've touched on, especially when we were talking about the African Union, that these people come in and they talk about the fact that Bazoum of Niger was removed from power. It's not democracy. They have to implement democracy by calling on Nigeria and the rest of ECOWAS to attack Niger. And then in the same breath, that story changes when it goes to, say, Gabon, where you have Brice Oligui, who has taken power by force, and they are sending the French ambassador to go consult with him and have conversations on business.
Okay.
And nobody's saying anything. And to address what you just said about the hypocrisy of the West, you see the situation in Israel, where Israel is basically kicking Palestinians and ethnically cleansing them of their land and taking their land. And that when they resist, they call it terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
And no one is supporting the Palestinians who are the victims here. Instead, they're providing all kinds of weapons to unalive Palestinians to
Mm-hmm.
kick Palestinians out of their land. Now, when it comes to the situation in Ukraine, they claim that Russia is attacking Ukraine, and when they're supporting Ukraine in that regards, but instead of supporting Palestine when when
Israel
Israel
is,
is
yeah.
taking Palestinian land, they do not support Palestine. So it just goes to show us that it's not only hypocrisy, but it's all a game of interest. Now, when
Yes.
it comes to the situation of Ambazonian, we should recognize the fact that because it's a game of interest, we also have to play on any conversations, on any struggles, on any fights, knowing that we are preserving the interest of Ambazonians and not relying on whatever anyone says.
Yes.
Conversations are going to come up. Very recently, we've started to hear about the fact that La Republique's loans are being suspended until there's a conversation with Ambazonians. Let's
Mm-hmm.
not be fooled, because
Yeah.
when those things come up, it is about somebody else's interest. We have
Yeah.
to understand what those people's interests are and how they pair and how they are at par with Ambazonia's interest, and
Mm-hmm.
how we can push Ambazonia's interest. At the end of the day, we always have to look at
Someone
Ambazonia's interest,
interest. Yep.
because they're never gonna unite the AU, the United Nations. It's not. I mean, the power of we all see just how powerless the United Nations is when it comes to this situation with Israel, because they're the hegemon and it's holding down. Supporting Israel every step of the way.
Yep.
That tells you they are protecting their individual interest
Interest.
against the collective interest of the world, countries, nations of the world, the collective interest. There have been votes where 180 countries voted in one way in support of Palestine, and then 10 countries, including mostly islands nations of 200,000 people here and there,
Mm-hmm.
because they're threatened of their aid packages being blocked. So they
Mm-hmm.
go with the flow, or they vote as abstention,
Yeah.
just so that way they can continue to be in the side of. So all of this is just to say that we should always be aware that nobody's going to look out for our interests. It is us that will look out for our interests, and we should continue the fight in that regards, knowing in the back of our minds that the fight we should fight as if it all depended on
On
us
us.
alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it really paint a very good image of how we need to look at this revolution, because, as you rightfully said, it's a game of interest. We should fight for Ambazonian interests. And the point is that I think that we are facing the dawn of the day to see what the world really is. I can bet you that when this revolution started in 2016, 2017, there were so many of us. If you sample the population, about 70-80% of our people, they knew that the world would look at our case on paper, black and white, and say, yeah, this is not right. Okay, let's fix it. You get it? That's if you go into most Ambazonian minds, that is what they perceived, and that's what they knew. That you see, not okay for real. Look at this case. Yeah, they didn't complete it, and they have a right to. Then okay, they fix things. That's what Amazonians had in mind. When we point out some of these things, it's for people to know that the decision for us to be free depends on us. Everybody who step in here will not step in out of a point of conscience, is interest. And unless Ambazonians start looking at this war from a perspective of Ambazonian interest, and not looking at a perspective, oh, they'll pity us, oh, there's a conscience. Look, because the fun is this, it all goes deeper. This is a whole deeper, battle. It exposes something that you and I can touch a little bit here. We have been indoctrinated and psychologically consumed to believe that the Western world have some high moral decency. They are people of high moral, they have an impeccable moral standard.
Right.
And they know that this is right and this is wrong. Okay, you need to do what is right. In such a way that we believed.
Right. We believe that there was an international law, or we believe that there was a rule
People
based.
high morality. People have high morality, moral standards.
Right.
Yes. We've always known that the Western people with high moral standards. That when they see that this is wrong, they say, no, this is clearly black and white wrong. Let's correct it. That was our mindset. And I believe, and to a certain extent, some of our people still have that mindset. No. They don't function on that. But they fooled us and gave us the perception to think that that is how they are. And we have been believing and thinking that when they see this black and white, they'll say, oh, this is right, this is wrong, and let's get this done. No. They don't function in that light. They are not that moral, shining star that people high moral shining star. You can say, oh, these are people. No.
Right.
They are not. So that's why we are appealing to Ambazonians that we have a clear plan. The plan is to remove Liberal Cameroon structures from our territory and figure out how to do self-governance. We follow the Somalia model. That's the worst case scenario. Maybe by the time we are done with Republic of Cameroon, some people might come in because of the point of interest to strike deals with us. And then they'll look at where they can fit in. They're not coming from a perspective of high moral standards. No. Where can we fit in the business world, in the business arena? That's where you start seeing some people making some elements or aspects of recognition. That's the only way out. We should know that. And this is something has taught us. Some of us run on the streets naked, takumbeng in the Western world, making a buffoon of ourselves, thinking that the people will see that high level of, they will see that these people have an issue, then they'll address it. Because we're doing. Well, the good thing is that it helps us to grow in the world, to understand that that is not what determines, what drives the world, what moves the world. There's a total different vehicle that is driving the world, and it is a vehicle on interest, And what you can see is this: what can call us or people to have a little bit of interest in our. When you have an unwavering leadership that knows exactly what you are fighting for and is not wavering, like you've seen some other fringe groups that came into this revolution, where maybe if this is not working, let's get this other piece, or maybe can we go to, then you don't know what you're fighting for. They will deal with the person that means what he says and does what he says. And if you talk about independence from when you started, that should be your compass, and you stick on to the direction of independence. There is nothing, there is no either or. Once they start seeing you wavering, then you don't know what you're fighting for. And it always shows that you don't have the capability of running a nation. Running a nation is not only governing your people, but also functioning in the world dynamics and the global geopolitics. So you see, it all boils down to one thing. Like we see, we've touched on a couple of things. West Africa, the resistance, what they faced, they overcame that, and they have broken the back of the hegemon that was meant to destroy them, and they have exposed them. We went on to AU, showing AU's incapability and the reasons behind that we cannot, from an Ambazonian perspective, depend on. Now, we're touching on the aspect of Palestine. The purpose is to show our people the level of resistance that these people have put for over 75 years and counting, and they have never given up, never wavered. the lessons our people have to be drawing from is that we are the owners and the people who decide on whether we want to be free or want to remain as slaves. And there are people that we are seeing in our generation that have been in the trenches for decades upon decades. We are also seeing our own brothers in the West Africa fighting and not knowing how tomorrow is going to look like. But they had one thing: total and unconditional freedom of their land and their people. And they are winning. So I believe Ambazonia can tap into that. So in totality, comrade, can you just give a picture of our conversation this evening and be able to really, come through, short it out. I mean, create a picture and give our people hope that there are things we can draw from and be able to understand that we are not in this just by ourselves. There are people fighting the same fight globally.
No, absolutely. And I will take that. I will spin that up in another. Let's look at it this way. Um, I have said this before, but I'm going to reiterate again. Prior to there's been a seismic shift in which the world is moving towards multipolarity, and that has given us some advantages. So previously, when we look at France's strategy in Africa, it was basically to bring all these nation states from like where Gabon is located to Central African Republic and moving all the way to Senegal to create what it was calling its paix carré, which is like the its sphere of influence, what it controlled. And in that regards, it started to basically convert the citizens of all of these territories to be like French citizens, for them to force French on them, to force the French system of education on them. If you look at all these countries, they are basically, their governments are structured exactly identical, together with like the French government, from the head of state, the kinds of powers that the head of state has, all the way down to basically this what they're calling the superfecture and that. So this was supposed to be like a French territory with all of French rules. And when you look at those license plate rules that you're talking about, CEMAC, that you mentioned, this was supposed to also be what governs all of the automotive transportation via license plates for all these territories, all organized under the French. They were supposed to govern this, exploit these resources, the resources of these places, to be like to support the growth of the French economy, to control their monetary system, to do everything controlled under the French. So, but what has happened is the fight, not just multipolarity that has driven that, but the fight for these individual territories that have gone on to create what we initially talked about, which was the confederacy between Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso, and somewhat Guinea-Conakry, somewhat Central African Republic, that are breaking up from these whole arrangements that the French had, and even to some extent, even Chad. The Chadian president is now worried and concerned about his own life, so pivoting towards what Russia and what the Confederacy is doing. So because of that, so now the French are more likely to compromise when it comes. Previously, they could not compromise in Ambazonia because by having an independent, very strong, I would hate to say Anglo-Saxon kind of system next to La République, that would have influenced the breakaway of La République from that arrangement in future, if that was led to stand. But now they will be more likely to have like the Nigerian kind of arrangement, where they have a lot of investments in Nigeria, yet still being able to control the Nigerian economy. So more likely to at least have some kind of a compromise, because that whole system doesn't exist anymore. the Malians, the Central African Republic, um, the Niger and Burkina Faso are already breaking up from that whole arrangement. So they're more likely to compromise now. The reason I bring that up is to give us hope that we have a chance to negotiate with the international community, negotiate with those that had their knee on our neck.
Yep.
And not only that, uh, La République du Cameroon has all these attacks that are coming from Boko Haram in the north, from the south,
Senegal, yes.
the east,
Yeah.
exactly, and then from even Central African Republic. The entire economy is weakened by a huge debt burden that all of the resources that they used to get from Ambazonia to buttress their annual budget, they haven't been getting that. So
Yep.
they're economically very weak and crumbling. They can barely clean their cities and thinking about coming to build Ambazonias. So this is the best time to go after them when they cannot afford to even pay their soldiers, afford to buy supplies for their
Yep.
soldiers. And also, if you look at the way that our structures have been, the ADF is now moving um, towards increasing the next generation of supplies that would help its fighting forces on ground
Yep.
zero to strengthen their hand. So,
Mm-hmm.
if you bring in the combination of all of these factors and the fact that year over year we've only gotten stronger, year over year, the support structures that the Ambazonian Defense Forces and the AGOFC has only gotten uh, um, much robust. I think that's a better word. Has gotten much robust. So the stars and the constellations are aligning in our favor. The arrangements that we are having with our partners, including not just the other sister forces, but with our brothers in the Biafra region, and expanding our reach and having them take care of some of the things that we couldn't take care of in relation to La Republique's forces. What the Biafra forces do is just maybe helping us. It's one less thing that we have to do at some point. So basically, stay the course. It is left for us now to become more energized. Left for us as Ambazonians, as we were talking about, and bringing in the picture of what the people in the Confederacy, Mali, Niger have done, the people of the Palestinians have done in their fight and their stick to itness.
Mm-hmm.
Even the Eritreans that fought for over 26, 27 years. Not that we're going to get there for 27 years, but just telling you
Oh,
that if others have done so, then we can do it too.
they,
Um,
they, they, have, they know exactly what they were fighting, and they fought. They didn't care
but
how
for it,
long it took. Yeah, you're right.
right.
You know, you said something, and one hope that Ambazonians to have is this: with all these changing dynamics in Africa, it can loosen up things very fast. Burkina and the trio, they are dislodging from ECOWAS, for figuring out how to dislodge from the Francophonie uh, total system. That can be send a seismic shift across Africa, even across the French hegemony, and that can trigger also Ambazonia's, can propel us faster into our independence. That is something that we have to also be taking note of. What is happening there can, cause a shift in tectonic plate across Africa. Places where they are strangling them, they will get some relief. And Ambazonia should be prepared to understand that, the faster those guys are taking the stride to free themselves, the better for us Ambazonians, and the easier for us our pathway will come up. Will be.
Yeah.
Secondly, there is also one narrative I just wanted to throw out a shot before we wrap it up. There's one narrative that I learned from recently, though we'll be diving seriously on that not long from now. That our forces on the ground have reduced. No, we have gotten better. We are not cannon fighters. We don't throw a wave of forces in the field less equipped to be killed. Ambazonians used to have about 200 forces in certain camps. We cut them down because we made a conscious decision with the Ambazonia that it's a crime to send fighters on the field with den guns. We are arming and upping our games. There were areas that we used to have 50 fighters with 40 den guns, or me with 45 den guns. Now in those areas, we have 15 fighters with 15 AKs. We have leaned the fighting forces and made them to be more effective and efficient. So there was a talk that they are seeing a reduction in force in the field. No, we have adapted to ensure that we secure our fighters, our people, our populations, and send all those who are able with the right tools to face the enemy. So I think we'll delve into that in the Defense Council will be talking about that not long from now. So, comrade, I know it's late on your side. Yeah. You and I can go on and on. I know we just have it. We try to bring this whole thing to let Ambazonians know that we are not having a unique situation. We can draw parallels to various things that are happening in this world. There are common people like us fighting for the heart and soul of their country, just like what we are doing. And we are on the right path. We have gone even 2 times ahead, 10 times ahead of some of those people who have been struggling. It's just a little push for us as Ambazonians to get to the finish line. If we do our basic duty, liberation tax, supporting the fundraising, paying liberation tax, supporting the forces on the ground, we'll do this job, and then doing everything possible, because now technically on the ground you can see that the biggest tool that the Republican has is propaganda and also traitors and collaborators. That's their biggest force. It's even bigger than the military forces. And as we fight along to collapse that particular non-combatant force within us, we get better and we'll get closer to our fighting line. Comrade, let me give you the floor to close out this discussion, and then you and I will also take a rest and plan for maybe another outing. Another time. Yeah. So can you do the final closure of this?
Yeah. Comrade, thank you very much. I would say that let La République du Cameroon know that sometimes it would take 1,000 cuts to bring down the lion. Slowly, we would use a spear. We would cut the nails. We'll cut the knees. We'll cut until the lion would come down, and then the dove will soar. At that point, we would know that Ambazonia meant business.
Yes.
So on that note, I wanted to thank you so much for having me on this platform. And it's always enjoyable for me to get together with you and have this conversation. And just like you said, sometimes we can have these things and talk forever. Ambazonians must know that from now, all that we need from you, it is your steadfastness, your concerted effort, participating in these fundraisers, providing what the fighting forces need to enable us to accelerate the provisions of everything that they need in terms of supplies to allow them to do their job. Thanks a lot, and thanks again for having me.
Thanks very much, comrade. Ambazonians should know from us on this platform that we shall be free. We have our freedom is unconditional. Our independence is unconditional. We don't have. There is no either or. Ambazonia is free now. We do it and we die for our freedom. Our future generation is not going to live through this. What we have gone through this past 6 years. We are the generation that's called upon to stop that particular the box stops because. Thanks very much, comrade. Thanks for your how you call it, that insight. In geopolitics. I know I always come to you when things happen. We brainstorm and look at how so that can be in our own situation. And I'll keep on relying on your insight on geopolitics. I'll keep on educating our people, and with the hope of making them know that there is just no way but unconditional independence for our land and for our future generations. Thanks very much, comrade. and let's keep it together till our next outing. Have a good night, brother.
Thank you very much.